coming back to this very early 65 AC50. An awful lot of stuff has been done. I got to be careful where I put my fingers. Some of this stuff stores voltage. Don't be so casual around amps as you may think I'm being in these videos. I know where not to put my fingers and where to put my fingers, though occasionally I do make exciting mistakes. I don't want you to be as excited if you're playing the home version. Anyway, as you can tell, everything on this board, this is the bias board and the output board, has been changed, except for this capacitor and the pots and the sockets. So we've got new grid stoppers at the output tubes. We've got new grid leaks. These are some Vichets. I have all the Mullard diodes. The amp's got a buzz. I changed these Mullard diodes out for some new Vichet 15408s, and I might have lessened the buzz, but there's some other causes of buzz we'll get to. So these may go back. They are pretty, and they measure fine out of circuit, but there's how something measures and how it actually performs under current. They're not always the same thing. So for right now, these 5408s are the better thing to have. I had to really rebuild this area of the board. The previous tech basically had these two caps in parallel with these two resistors, the same way that these two caps are in parallel with these two resistors. So this amp would never have worked because the bias voltage was like -7. It would have nuked tubes. One of the things I'm about to do after I talk a little bit about what I've done so far is, because the bias circuit was so messed up, this pair of EL34s that came with the amp may not have enjoyed that. So I don't want to chase my tail on noise and buzz if it's just some hummy damaged output tubes. But I did start with the provided tubes. Anyway, looking at how this thing should be built, looking at the schematic, this capacitor actually would have been in parallel with the board on this axis. But given the size of the 2 watts that I have here versus the size of the 10 microfarad caps here, I thought this layout made more sense to have the long span with the longer axials and the shorter span with these 2-watt resistors here. I did put back the 47 ohm resistors from cathode to ground on each pair. Quick note, as I'm looking at things and thinking of things, not in terms of the sequence of what to check in an amp, the Vox schematic says to adjust the bias on each of these 2 pots until you measure 2.2 volts DC across each resistor. That equates to a bias of about 90% idle dissipation. They were biasing it as if it were cathode biased, which was a terrible mistake. And I've got these biased on the cool side until I get everything healthy. I've got it biased at about 25 milliamp per tube, which turns into just under 50% idle dissipation. I can increase that once I get everything healthy, but I wanted to make sure that the tubes had a fighting chance while I sorted everything else out. It certainly gets noisier. I did try it at the recommended 2.2 volts, and the amp has a ton of noise when you do that because the output tubes want to self-immolate between the stock bias setting that Vox would have put on this thing and then what some tech had done by rebuilding the bias supply wrong. I'm surprised that there's not a whole bunch of burnt, charred section of this amp, though that does have one replaced octal socket. Oh, real fast. I also lifted this light brown or grayish wire going to ground here. It's one of the secondary center taps of the power transformer. It turns out that the lighter of the two is the filament center tap, and with that lifted out of the way, here are the filament connections from the transformer. I did put in these 100 ohm half-watt resistors to ground. This is both ground here, just to see if that would help. It has a slight bit, but that's not the culprit for the remaining buzz. We'll get there. All right, you can see I've got a new volume pot for the normal channel, and it has a new cap here because the old cap was not long enough, the leads. So the Vichet here. I've got a new bass pot here as well. The old one had the broken off shaft. All the other pots are new, and I'm waiting for the new grub screws to arrive from Britain for the knobs that go on these 3 pots. Throughout the amp, I've got Vichet and F&T capacitors. These are the dual section 16 microfarad caps that I mentioned that were a little bit difficult to find. This green wire here is so that as I was setting the bias, I wanted the preamp to be silent. So it went through the bias off. So this is one of the grounds, and this is the input to the phase inverter. So I just silenced the output while setting the bias. Because before I did that, even with the knobs at 0, not only was there a little bit of noise in the amp, but it was really hard to get a steady voltage reading across the primaries of the output transformer. Just not a very stable circuit in its current state. More on that. So Vichy cathode bypass caps, all new resistors throughout. All the Eries and Hunts were junk, as to be expected. This thing was taken apart, all the grounds cleaned up. I know I'm repeating a little bit of stuff I told you in the last video, but it's important in context. Grounded power cable reinstalled. You can't see that right now. I'll move the camera down just a bit and show you that. Right now, everything is as it was when it left the factory if they had used these components. So carbon films in the signal path, the audio path, and these metal films just for droppers. And there's the cleaned up AC wiring down here with a new bulb installed. And it's nice and pretty. Everything clean, good connections. The ground's longer than the hot and neutral. Blah, blah, blah. I've shown that a lot. Let's power it on. The nice, clean, shiny dressed nut makes me happy. So this is the hum and buzz the amp has with both channels not just off, but the input to the phase inverter muted. Now I've got both channel volumes off. Let me lift that ground and shunt. There's that self noise and kind of an oscillation, which may be just picking up a lot of the electrical interference from the room. I've got a Wi-Fi router, etc. And the tube shields, they didn't come with this tube shields. I touch the tubes. That's not making a difference. There's some kind of oscillation happening. If I turn up the channel volumes, some heater noise on the treble channel. The buzz isn't much worse. If I turn up the normal channel, big buzz, big buzz. Let's see if this plays on the video. In my test before, if I pull V1, which is a 12AU7, and yes, I've tried a different 12AU7, then I still get buzz when I turn up the volume of this channel. But notice the buzz decreases when it's at either end, if it's at 0 or if it's at 10. So if it's at 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock, the buzz isn't there. Anywhere in between, the buzz gets worse. That is a sign of a ground loop. That's where we'll go next. The AC50 in this period had 4 chassis ground connections. One is down here, and it's used only for the AC safety ground. That's fine. There's one right here that I don't entirely trust, though I have cleaned it as much as possible, because the output transformer overlaps these 2 holes. So the transformer is actually here, sitting on top of these screws. So it's really hard for me to clean this as thoroughly as I'd like, and it's really hard to tighten this as thoroughly as I'd like. We may put a new hole somewhere where the transformer is not, which will allow me to really be sure of this. But aside from that, everything that you see here, with the exception of the AC safety cable, is grounded to here. So you've got the preamp filter caps, all 4 of them, dual sections. They're grounded here, which goes to this series of ground strings, which starts over here. And it just works its way down, catches all the cathode bypass caps, and goes to here. And you have the output center tap reference. Oh, sorry, the output common reference goes to here, which goes to here. You've got the input jacks, which go to here, and then from there to there. And then everything on the pots goes in a string to the connection on the input jacks, which then goes to here. And in theory, that should all be good. I need to go through here and see if there are any duplicate paths. Sometimes in Voxes, there'll be more than one path to ground. And just from a builder's mistake. So I need to make sure I haven't missed anything in here. But I think if I were to separate some of the stuff from that's going to here and then to here and just have it all go to here independently, that might help. I'll play around with that. Before I move the camera angle, I've got a resistor kind of hanging in the air here. It's a 47K. When testing the amp last night, I had it across the output of these two coupling caps in the phase inverter, just so I had a fixed cross-line mastered volume so I could test the amp without making a bunch of noise in the other room. It's disconnected at this end now. It won't go home like this, but that's what this is. One of the other main grounds is made here. And again, I removed this and got it really clean and tightened as much as I could, but it cannot be tightened as much as I would like. This is one of the board standoff locations from the other side, and it just does not tighten much more than it is, and it's not a tooth washer. So I may revisit this one. And there's this one here for all this stuff. Now, in theory, this one is the same as the one that's on the other side of right here, is the same that's on right about here. And they measure the same, but just because something measures equivalent does not mean it is actually equivalent. In some boxes, I've had good results with disconnecting grounds made in one board, running the wires through, making them all at one point in the chassis. Because while this measures to a meter as ground, the same as this part of the chassis does, there can always be some very slight, almost unmeasurable resistive differences, at least with the meters that most of us own. Whereas if you just say, I'm just going to bypass this and use that chassis for reference, all of a sudden everything's happy. But I don't want to go through here and just start making sweeping changes. The first thing I want to do is make sure that when someone rebuilt this board, they didn't do something stupid and give it multiple paths to ground. Same for the grounds on the other one. Before I reinvent the wheel, I'll make sure that something simple is not going on that I just missed, because there's a lot of trees here. And after a while, I don't see the forest anymore. So it's good to take little breaks. But before I end this video and dive into all the nasties lurking in the beast, I'm going to play us out. I'm going to say thanks for watching now, though I'm going to let you hear it a little bit. We're going to start with just the normal channel.